Welcome, adventurers. Who else remembers earth, wind, fire, water, and heart? Or what about saying earth, wind, and fire, always in that order, because that is the music that your parents played at parties? Oh, nostalgia. Today, we're talking about the Kineticist. All right, we are finally doing it. We're talking about the newest class in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, the Kineticist. I think I've read through it and understand it enough to finally talk about it intelligently, so here we go. A Kineticist is a constitution-based, Kineticist. They're not magic and they're not really martial. They are trained in simple weapons, they have light armor proficiency, and 8 hit points per level. They're trained into a number of skills equal to 3 plus their intelligence modifier plus nature. And the subclass system is sort of dictated by which of the 6 elements you choose to focus on. Now, there are a lot of new concepts to discuss with the Kineticist, so let's dive right in. So there are some new concepts to talk about when we're talking about the Kineticist. First of all, they are a constitution-based class, and they are the first of their kind. This is kind of cool because you will have a lot of hit points as you level up, given that you will keep adding that constitution modifier to your hit point pool level after level. On the other hand, there aren't any skills that use constitution as their modifier, so you won't have any sort of built-in secondary skills that you're good at. All other classes do gain this benefit. For example, as a sorcerer who uses charisma as your key ability score, well, you kind of are automatically good at diplomacy and intimidation and deception. And the Kineticist doesn't really benefit from that. The other thing to talk about with the Kineticist is what they do exactly, because it's not magic and it's not martial, but it's kind of magic in a way. You do need to have one hand free to use your kinetic impulses, which, let's face it, are basically spells, but they're not. And the rules also stipulate that abilities that restrict you from casting spells or protect against spells also apply to impulses. So, basically spells. Now, a Kineticist draws their power from their elements. There are 6 elements to choose from, and they are kind of familiar because they're somewhat like the damage types that you get with some spell attacks, but it's not quite the same. There are basically 3 pairings. You have air and earth, water and fire, and then metal and wood. Those 2 are really quite new. And as a Kineticist, you can either choose to focus on one element at level 1, or you can dive into 2. If you are choosing to focus on a single element, then you are using what is called a single gate. When you select your initial 2 impulse feats, your class feats, you have to pick from the feats that match the element type that you are using. Makes sense, right? So if you are an air Kineticist, you can only choose air impulse feats. But you do gain access to something super cool called an impulse junction. Now, this is something that you do or sort of happens to you while you use your impulses only if you are a single gate Kineticist, and specifically only if you use a 2-action impulse. We'll go over the impulses in a bit, but just imagine it for now as being your standard 2-action damage cantrip. Well, something else happens, or you get to do something else while you do that. If you are a single gate fire Kineticist, then when you are dealing fire damage from your impulse, you get to increase the damage die by 1 step. If you are a wood Kineticist, then you gain temporary hit points equal to your level. So you can see here that the impulse junction is sort of the reward for specializing on a single element. But there are also rewards for having a dual gate or focusing on 2 different elements. First of all, as you are choosing your class feats, well, you can choose from either element, so there is more flexibility there. Second of all, you will have more variety in the types of damage that you can deal. That's because each of the elements has 2 different damage types associated with it. It's usually a physical and a non-physical, but sometimes it is 2 physical damages. And well, if you have 2 different elements, you have the potential to have 4 different damage types that you can deal with on a per turn basis, which is, well, twice as many as you would get as a single gate kineticist. Plus, later on, kind of much later on, you do gain access to some super cool impulses called Composite Impulses. We will talk about those, but much later because there's a lot to cover in this video. And as you level up, starting at level 5 and every 4 levels thereafter, you can choose to either stay dedicated in your element or pick up new ones with a class feature called Gates Threshold. If you choose to stay with your element, that is called Expanding the Portal, and if you choose to pick up a new one, that is called Forking the Path. Either way, you do pick up a new impulse feat, but if you choose to stick with that one element, then you will also gain access to a gate junction. And these gate junctions come in 4 different flavors. You have a critical blast, elemental resistance, an aura junction, and a skill junction. They're somewhat self-explanatory, but real briefly here, a critical blast is an extra effect that happens when you land a critical hit. Elemental resistance is, well, damage resistance. Aura junction is going to be something that sort of happens in your aura. And then a skill junction is training in a skill plus a skill feat using that skill. Just one example here, if you are a wood kineticist and you pick up the aura junction, then any ally who starts their turn in your aura will gain a temporary hit point that lasts until the start of their next turn. All right, so you've got your kineticist, you have chosen your element or elements with your single or dual gate, and you're ready to use them. Well, in order to do so, you have to open up your kinetic gate with an action called Channel Elements. Now, Channel Elements is a single action and it is automatic. There is no roll associated with it. This is a big distinguisher between something like, well, going into overdrive as an inventor or panache as a swashbuckler. Having it be an automatic action is really nice, and it is something I really like about this action. The other thing that I really like about it is that you can use a 1-action elemental blast or a 1-action stance impulse while channeling your elements. This means it's not quite the same action tax that hunt prey or rage or a monk stance is, and this is the second thing that I really like about it. But in order to fully understand that, we should probably talk about these impulses and, well, elemental blast. Before we get into elemental blast and some of the specific impulses, let's talk about impulses in general. They're not spells, but they're basically spells. Specifically, they are described as a type of magical action available to kineticists. So it's not a spell, but it is magic. We should talk about some of the similarities and differences between spells and impulses, starting with a difference, namely that a impulse level is always going to match a character level. So a level 5 character is going to use a level 5 impulse. This differs from the way that spells work. A level 5 character is going to cast a level 3, or should I say a rank 3 spell. And in fact, maybe that's part of why, as part of the remaster, they renamed spell level to spell rank. A similarity between spells and impulses is the way your attack modifier works and how it relates to your class DC. It's basically going to be +7 is what it comes down to. You're going to use that constitution modifier, your level, and then your proficiency. So very similar to the way that spell attack rolls work. Another similarity between spells and impulses is that some of the impulses will directly say, you gain the effects of, and then they will list a spell name, and then you go look that spell up and then read what it does. So it's not a spell, it just, does exactly what the spell does. All right, so that's what impulses are. Now let's talk about some specific impulses, starting with Elemental Blast. This is sort of your go-to damage cantrip, in air quotes, that you can use as a kineticist. What I really like about it is that it can be done from range or melee and it can be done as 1 or 2 actions. So there are actually 4 total outcomes of Elemental Blast. Let's first talk about a 1-action range Elemental Blast. This will be delivered from either 30 or 60 feet and will deal either a d6 or d8 damage of 2 different damage types, all depending on the element that you are using. We will use wood as an example here, and that will deal d8 bludgeoning or vitality damage at 30 feet. Well, what happens if you take that 1-action range and make it a 1-action melee? Well, you get to add your strength modifier to the damage. So let's say for this example, you have a +2 strength, you're a wood element kineticist, you will be dealing a d8 +2 from range. And again, that will be bludgeoning or vitality damage. All right, now let's talk about 2 actions at range. Well, now you get to add your Constitution modifier to the damage. So assuming you have a +4 con, as a wood kineticist, you will be dealing a d8 +4 at 30 feet. And then finally, putting it all together with a 2-action melee, you will add both your strength and your Constitution modifier to that damage. So it is going to be a d8 +4 +2 bludgeoning or vitality damage for that wood kineticist. And I really love the flexibility of this core feature of the kineticist. It has some elements of being a ranged blaster caster, but also of doing upfront magical damage like the Magus does. It means you have a lot of flexibility in choosing which direction, or maybe going with both, that you would like to do as a kineticist. So Elemental Blast is one of the 2 impulses granted to all kineticists. The other is called Base Impulse.
Whoops, Base Kinesis, not Base Impulse. Script says Base Kinesis. Title card says Base Kinesis. I said Base Impulse. Good job, me.
And this is pretty simple. You can generate, move, or suppress some of the element or elements that you focus on. For example, you could produce a little bit of flame. Not the cantrip, but you know what I mean. You could create a gust of wind. You could divert some water. All of those types of things. I see it being really handy in roleplay, but I don't know, who knows? You could put out some fires or something with it too. All right, so you've got those 2 core impulses that are available to all kineticists, provided to all kineticists, I should say. That's Elemental Blast and Base Kinesis. But as you are building out your character at level 1 and moving forward through the levels, you do get to pick from other impulses. And remember, you have to pick from impulses that match your element type. Now, each element type I see as having a bit of a unique flavor to it. Each element is going to pick up some area of effect damage, and then they usually have some form of movement or protection or buffing or debuffing that is also associated with them. For example, I see the air kineticist sort of having a lot of fantastic movement as well as protection through obscuring yourself. You have lightning dash, 4 winds, flying updraft, and cyclonic ascent. For that protection, you have air shroud and clear as air, which, well, makes you invisible. I see the earth elemental as having this aura of protection through armor, as well as movement through sort of forging your own path. You have armor in earth, calcifying sand, spike skin, and rock rampart. For the movement, you have stepping stones and swim through earth. The fire element, I think, mostly focuses on area of effect damage with flying flame, scorching column, blazing wave, solar detonation. All shall end in flames and ignite the sun. Wow, if you want to go crazy and burn stuff, this is the way to do it. The metal impulses tend to have some sort of element of, well, pseudo-crafting, creating new or modifying things with flash forge, metal carapace, plate and treasure, scrap barricade, and shatter shields. Water seems to focus on protection and healing with deflecting wave, ocean's balm, torrent in the blood, which is actually a good thing, and sea glass guardians. Wood also deals in healing, though it tends to be more natural food-based healing, but they also have access to some really cool, difficult terrain and hazard type impulses. For the healing, you have fresh produce and dash of herbs. And for those hazards, you have timber sentinel, ravel of thorns, drifting pollen, and hedge maze. All right, to recap, you're a kineticist. You focus on one or two elements. You either have a single or dual gate. You have your two impulses that are offered to all kineticists, that is Elemental Blast and Base Kinesis. You have picked up two more impulses that are specific to your element. Well, some very exciting things happen if you happen to be a dual gate kineticist once you get to level 4 or 6 in some cases. Now you get to pick from composite impulses. These are impulses that are a combination of two elements, and they are really cool. There are too many to go through in great detail, but I'm going to highlight some of my favorites. When you combine wood and metal, you have an elemental artillery. It's a ballista. It deals 3d12 damage. That's awesome. When you combine wood and earth, you get jagged berms. You can place 6 of these out on the battlefield, and they provide cover, difficult terrain, and damage to people who try to move at them in the wrong way. This is the ultimate tool in battlefield control. Combining water and fire leads to a steam knight. You're a knight shrouded in steam. You deal fire damage, you've got extra movement. Doesn't get much better than that. And I suppose we should talk about just a few other terms, though we'll make this brief, and then we will finally get onto some of the opinions about the kineticist. Starting with stance, some of the impulses that you will see will have the stance trait. This means that when you use this impulse, you drop into that stance and you stay in that stance, and some sort of an effect continues. Generally, these are things that happen within your kinetic aura, or the area around you that is sort of imbued with your elemental energy. The other term to discuss is overflow. Some of the impulses are so powerful that once you use them, you shut down your kinetic gate. You then must use channel elements again to open your gate back up, and you can never use 2 impulses with the overflow trait in a single turn. All right, so that was a lot of mechanics and new terminology. What about the opinions? Well, it's maybe a little too early to tell because I haven't seen this in actual gameplay yet, and I do find that the way things seem on paper often isn't quite how they work out in practice. But all that being said, I really do like what I see so far. I think that with the flexibility of that core elemental blast attack, with the plethora of area of effect options, and then with all of those cool secondary control movement sort of impulses, you're going to have a pretty dedicated damage dealer with good secondary actions that they can take, and I think you are going to enjoy a pretty engaging and exciting character if you choose to play as a kineticist. Well, that was a lot to cover, and I am missing the actual gameplay part of this, but I'm still pretty confidently going to give the Kineticist a 9 out of 10 Stay Puffed Marshmallow Men absolutely torched by your Pyrokineticist. I'm sure you know what the call to action here is going to be. Have any of you taken a dive headfirst right into the Kineticist and are already using it in one of your campaigns? How is it going? Do you have gameplay anywhere that the rest of us can watch or listen to? I would love to hear about how playing as the Kineticist is working out in the real world, or I suppose really in the fake world of Galarian, but you know what I mean. If you have any examples of the Kineticist in action, please let us know about it in the comments. Until then, keep reminding both the marshals and the magic users that you're technically not one of them. But if the alchemist tries to bond with you over that somewhat shared characteristic, make sure to let them know you are way better than them.